1. Vladimir Lanin, the general who unleashed terror. Generals are expected to defend their people, yet history remembers them for the lives they destroyed. Among the bloodiest was Vladimir Lanin, who converted a revolution into violence and reigned like a warlord during peacetime. Born in 1870 to a comfortable middle-class family in Russia, Lenin's path to power was never meant to be a peaceful one. At the age of 17, his older brother was killed for plotting the Tsar's assassination. That one experience altered Lenin's perception of justice and morality. He wasn't simply upset, he got obsessed with vengeance. Instead of mending, he chose hate. He became engrossed in Marxist philosophy, seeking ultimate dominance rather than freedom. During the Russian Revolution of 1917, Lenin rose to power. But instead of bringing freedom, he unleashed terror. He established the Cheka, a secret police that tracked down and murdered anybody branded as an enemy of the revolution. During the Red Terror from 1918 to 1922, almost 200,000 individuals, including men, women, and children, were tortured and slaughtered without trial. He also ordered the execution of Tsar Nicholas II and his whole family, including his 5 children. In 1921, Lenin repressed a workers' insurrection at Kronstadt, executing almost 10,000 of the people who had previously backed him. When peasants opposed his grain grabs, he resorted to such ruthless methods that a famine broke out, killing around 5 million people. Lenin passed away in 1924 following a series of strokes, but by then, Russia was already devastated and silent. The repressive machine he created survived. His legacy was not revolution. Rather, it was mass murder, censorship, and state terror. He did not merely lead a revolution, he buried an entire nation beneath it. 2. Iwane Matsui, the infamous Hitler of Japan. This general was not a ferocious warlord or a ruthless ruler. Instead, he was a soft-spoken general who enjoyed poetry and philosophy. But beneath that calm appearance was a man who directed one of the most heinous killings of the 20th century, the Nanjing Massacre. Born in 1878, Iwane Matsui ascended through the ranks of the Imperial Japanese Army, earning a reputation for intelligence, culture, and discipline. However, his devotion to the emperor and steadfast confidence in Japanese superiority would take a fatal turn. During Japan's invasion of China in 1937, he was assigned to head the Shanghai-Nanjing operation. His mission was clear: to destroy Chinese opposition and conquer Nanjing, the Republic of China's capital. What ensued afterwards was a slide into hell. When Japanese soldiers broke into Nanjing in December 1937, Matsui arrived shortly thereafter to celebrate the triumph. However, for 6 weeks, his army transformed the city into a cemetery. Over 300,000 people and captives were massacred in cold blood. Women, some as young as 8, were assaulted, disfigured, and killed. Entire families were hauled to the streets and executed. Victims were burnt alive, buried in large pits, and used for bayonet practice. The rivers ran red, and the air smelled like death. Matsui stated that he was uninformed of the full extent of the crimes. However, testimonials, diaries, and images showed differently. Here's one of the testimonials from the interviews taken by USC Showa Foundation.
他这不是乱杀人，他找的人，像人地人好比话了，他除非看不到，看到李白河，来了3个也好，来5个也好，给你找得过，再给你弄死。结果以后发现这个问题，是女人咱们都没死，没死掉的也有哎，多个拉回来，都那么烧了锅面灰，回去烧锅，弄锅面灰了，赶脸上抹。
Iwane Matsui strolled amid the ruins, attended ceremonies, and delivered speeches as the cries of the tormented resonated close to him. He had the power to stop it. He chose not to. Following the war, he was detained by the Allies and was charged before the International Military Tribunal for the Far East. In 1948, he was found guilty of war crimes and executed. Matsui walked to the gallows silently, just as he had seen Nanjing burn, without regret or struggle. He wasn't only a general. He was a guy who let the gates of hell open and smirked as hundreds were dragged in. 3. Ante Pavelic, the general who was feared by the Nazis. This tyrant was known for his ruthlessness, and he governed by fanaticism rather than fear. Pavelic was more than simply a general. He was the mastermind behind a massacre so heinous that even the Nazi officials were shocked by its atrocities. Pavelic was born in 1889 in modern-day Croatia and studied as a lawyer. However, his primary interest was ultranationalism. In the early 1930s, he created the Ustaše, a fascist and fiercely racist movement aimed at building an ethnically pure Croatian nation. During the Axis invasion of Yugoslavia in 1941, Hitler and Mussolini granted Pavelić his aim of establishing an independent state of Croatia. What ensued was not administration, it was butchery on a massive scale. Pavelić targeted Serbs, Jews, Roma, and anyone who did not align with his vision of a clean Croatia. His directives were straightforward and merciless: convert, evacuate, or be killed. Over 300,000 Serbs were slaughtered during his reign, many of them in hideous medieval fashion. Victims were wounded with knives, burnt alive, thrown into pits, or fatally tortured in concentration camps such as Jasenovac, often known as the Auschwitz of the Balkans. Some guards raced to see who could kill the most individuals in a single night. Children were separated from their families and killed, often in front of their parents. Pavelic's lack of remorse added to his nasty nature. He saw mass murder as necessary for national cleansing. Even Nazi authorities, used to methodical slaughter, were appalled by the sadistic nature of the Ustaše. Heinrich Himmler is said to have decried the chaotic butchery. As the war ended, Pavelić fled to Austria, Italy, and Argentina. He evaded justice. He spent more than a decade in hiding before being injured in a botched assassination attempt in 1957. He died 2 years later in Spain, never prosecuted or punished. Pavelic's government was not just based on fear, he constructed it himself, fueled it with ideas, and proudly defended it. 4. Enver Pasha, the general who ruined the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire is often named in glory and pride. Born in such a flourished empire, Enver Pasha was once seen as the shining youthful face of a fading empire, a military modernizer, a revolutionary hero, and a man preoccupied with restoring Ottoman power. But beneath the shiny medals and big speeches was a commander who destroyed his own empire and left a bloody legacy. Enver, born in 1881 in what is now Turkey, advanced fast through the Ottoman military ranks. Charming and ambitious, he helped lead the Young Turk Revolution in 1908, which promised change but quickly deteriorated into ultranationalism. By the time World War I broke out, Enver was more than simply a general. He was the Ottoman Empire's Minister of War, and therefore one of its 3 ultimate rulers. That power went straight to his head, and it led to calamity. His darkest crime began with an idea that included Armenians, Greeks, and Assyrians, Christian minorities that had resided in Anatolia for millennia. Under Enver's direction, the empire perpetrated the Armenian genocide. In 1915, Enver ordered the expulsion of Armenian soldiers from the Ottoman army. Thousands were transported to isolated sites and executed. Next came the civilians. More than 1.5 million Armenians, including women, children, and the elderly, were forced to march through the Syrian desert. The majority did not survive. They were malnourished, assaulted, brutalized, and slaughtered by Ottoman forces or local mobs incited by propaganda. Enver knew. He agreed. He described it as a necessary measure. His military command was no better. In 1914, he commanded a devastating winter campaign against Russia in the Sarakamish Mountains. Despite being ill-prepared and ill-equipped, he led 90,000 Ottoman troops only for them to freeze to death because Enver wasn't willing to accept the defeat. When the Ottoman Empire fell apart, Enver escaped to Germany, then to Central Asia, with the goal of unifying Turkic peoples into a new empire. However, in 1922, while spearheading an anti-Soviet revolt in Tajikistan, he was attacked and eliminated by Red Army troops. In his pursuit of glory, he destroyed an empire and contributed to one of history's worst atrocities. 5. Shaka Zulu, the general who shook Africa. This general shook Africa like many few before. Shaka Zulu did not inherit authority. Rather, he grabbed, controlled, and governed it with a spear in one hand and fear in the other. Some regard him as a military genius, yet his rule over the Zulu kingdom was also characterized by violence, paranoia, and rivers of blood. Shaka, the illegitimate son of a small Zulu chief, was born about 1787 and spent his childhood being teased and tormented. Those early humiliations molded him into a man fascinated with domination. When his father died, Shaka took authority, not via inheritance, but by pure force. Once in command, he turned the Zulu tribe from a loosely organized clan into a formidable fighting machine. He transformed combat techniques in southern Africa. Shaka substituted throwing spears with short stabbing spears, created novel fight formations like the buffalo horns, and insisted on rigorous physical training. His men marched barefoot over thorns, bled during exercises, and were instructed to end anybody who fell behind. Cowards were executed. Defeat was not an option. But military reform was only the beginning. Shaka's army massacred or displaced up to 2 million people in what historians refer to as the Mfukane, the crushing. Villages were burnt, survivors enslaved, and enemy leaders impaled or flayed alive. Those who opposed feared destruction, while those who submitted lived in continual terror. Even within his kingdom, life was ruled by Shaka's iron will. He banned marriage for his soldiers, demanded total loyalty, and executed anyone he suspected of disloyalty, sometimes entire families. When his mother died in 1827, Shaka's grief exploded into madness. He ordered no crops to be planted that year. No milk was to be consumed. Over 7,000 people were executed for not mourning deeply enough. His paranoia eventually caught up with him. In 1828, Shaka was assassinated by his half-brothers, ending a reign as feared as it was admired. 6. Curtis LeMay, the general who commanded the mushroom. If you think you have seen all evils, you are wrong, because this next man is remembered as the eliminator of generations. Curtis LeMay was a guy who not only sanctioned the slaughter of people, but also organized it. As a commander in the United States Air Force during World War II and the Cold War, he was cold, calculating, and unashamedly violent. What about his legacy? Not battles, but entire cities burned to ash. LeMay, born in Ohio in 1906, was a tough, intelligent tactician who swiftly advanced through the ranks of the military. But beneath his clean suit and steely eyes was a man who redefined mass murder from the sky. During World War II, he led the Strategic Air Command and orchestrated the famed firebombing operation against Japan. It was not about targeted warfare, it was about crippling destruction at any cost, even children. On March 9th and 10th, 1945, LeMay launched Operation Meeting House, a single night during which 334 B-29 bombers fired incendiary bombs on Tokyo. The outcome was that over 100,000 citizens were burnt alive, more than at Hiroshima or Nagasaki. Nearly 16 square kilometers of the city were destroyed. The bombs were intended to not only kill, but also incinerate homes, suffocate families in bunkers, and leave survivors with burnt skin and damaged brains. And that was only one city. Under LeMay's orders, 67 Japanese cities were firebombed, killing more than 500,000 residents. He subsequently stated, "If we had lost the war, we'd have all been prosecuted as war criminals." But LeMay did not stop there. During the Cold War, he was the architect of America's nuclear policy, openly advocating that the US blow the Soviet Union, quote-unquote, back into the Stone Age. Curtis LeMay did not retire peacefully. In the 1960s, at the height of the Vietnam War, he was again in the spotlight, this time as the Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, and then as a vice presidential candidate in 1968, and once again, he called for annihilation. That's what makes LeMay so terrifying. He did not murder with a sword or spear. He murdered with cold reasoning, firestorms, and mushroom clouds. He demonstrated to the world how modern warfare can destroy towns before a single soldier steps in.